Michael Joseph Jackson was born in the city of Gary in the state of Indiana, the seventh child in a large working family. Jackson entered music as a child with his brothers, guided by Joseph Jackson's strict management and a household centered on performance and rehearsals. Relationships within the Jackson family shaped early discipline and ambition, and Motown provided a formative professional environment after the group relocated to the city of Detroit, then to the city of Los Angeles. Michael's vocal blend of youthful clarity and mature phrasing distinguished the Jackson Five, and close mentoring from Motown staff writers and producers refined his stagecraft and studio skills. Jackson's public contributions traversed the end of the Motown era into global solo success. With his brothers, he delivered chart leaders that introduced a youthful face of Motown to national television audiences, expanding the label's reach to younger listeners. After departing the company, Jackson, working with Quincy Jones, helped define the sound and form of the modern pop album and the modern short-form music film. Thriller became a cultural benchmark through its songwriting, layered production, and visual storytelling that used dance as narrative language. Jackson's influence reshaped music video programming on cable television, opened new international markets for American pop, and set touring standards for scale and choreography. Professional milestones were accompanied by public controversies, including highly covered legal matters and disputes about image, authorship, and business control. Across these years, Jackson's work remained a reference point for cross-genre production, dance vocabulary, and charitable fundraising through musical events. In the final period, medical dependence and pressure from complex business obligations became increasingly visible. Preparations for a planned concert series in the City of London placed tight demands on rehearsal schedules and health management. Jackson died in the city of Los Angeles in the month of June in the year 2009, with medical findings identifying an acute sedative event administered in a private residence. Subsequent legal proceedings centered on clinical judgment, treatment setting, and the chain of responsibility for care, establishing a record that shaped industry and medical discussion about celebrity health oversight. Jackson was entombed at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in the city of Glendale in the Great Mausoleum, a private complex noted for limited public access and controlled visitation. The resting place is within a secure interior corridor, and the location has become a discreet focal point for scheduled family observances and seasonal floral tributes coordinated through cemetery staff. Fans often gather at exterior points of the cemetery or at public murals and theaters linked to major releases, since the mausoleum interior is not open to routine public entry. It is historically relevant that one of the most publicly visible performers of the late 20th century rests in one of the most private memorial settings in Southern California. The contrast reflects long-standing practices at Forest Lawn for high-profile interments, and it has shaped patterns of commemoration toward public plazas, theaters, and charitable anniversaries rather than open graveside access. David Eli Ruffin was born in rural Mississippi and raised in a large family with strong church ties and a tradition of quartet singing. Early travel with gospel groups exposed Ruffin to professional stages and touring routines, and a move to the city of Detroit brought connections with local musicians and producers aligned with Motown. Relationships within the Temptations formed through shared rehearsals and the guidance of the label's choreographers and song departments, and friendships and rivalries inside the group shaped expectations about lead roles, public image, and schedules. Family links remained close, including ties to his brother Jimmy, who also pursued a recording career. Ruffin's public contribution was defined by a distinctive lead tenor with a gritty edge that cut through polished arrangements. With the Temptations, he fronted hallmark singles that linked romantic narrative to modern rhythm sections, helping establish the group as a standard bearer for male vocal harmony. Stagecraft combined precision choreography with expressive gestures, and Ruffin's vocal attack offered dramatic peaks that became signatures of live performance. After leaving the group, Ruffin pursued a solo career that delivered chart success and maintained his presence on the touring circuit. He faced contractual disputes, shifting management, and periods of constrained output that reflected wider industry pressures. Cultural impact persisted through cover versions, sampling, and performance traditions that cited his phrasing as a reference point for soul vocalists. In later years, health issues and legal challenges accumulated alongside documented struggles with substances, interrupting steady work and straining professional relationships. Touring remained a primary source of income, often involving regional runs with fellow alumni. In the late spring of the year 1991, Ruffin returned to the city of Philadelphia after concert dates and experienced a medical emergency associated with a drug-related incident. He died in the city that June, and medical and police records established the circumstances and timeline. The news prompted widespread statements from Motown peers and renewed attention to the pressures of celebrity, travel, and access to clinical support. Ruffin was buried at Woodlawn Cemetery in the city of Detroit, a site with deep connections to the Motown community. The gravesite has served as a focal point for family visits and for admirers who associate his voice with the label's peak era. Floral tributes and anniversary gatherings occur at intervals, and the cemetery grounds provide a setting where several Motown figures are remembered in proximity. It is historically relevant that a voice so closely linked to Detroit's musical identity rests in a Detroit cemetery, reinforcing the city's role in shaping and preserving the memory of the classic soul era. The gravesite consolidates public remembrance within a landscape shared by other alumni, emphasizing community ties beyond the stage. Mary Wilson was born in the city of Greenville in the state of Mississippi and raised in the city of Detroit after an early family move that placed her within a close community of relatives and neighbors. As a teenager, Wilson formed friendships with Florence Ballard and Diana Ross, relationships that developed into the Primeads, then into the Supremes under Motown's supervision. Mentors within the label's artist development unit shaped etiquette, diction, and stage presentation, while producers and songwriters guided the group's sound. Wilson balanced group responsibilities with family commitments, maintaining long-standing ties to Detroit as the group's fame expanded. Wilson's public contribution centered on group cohesion, vocal blend, and the maintenance of brand identity through periods of transition. As the Supremes rose to national prominence, Wilson served as a stabilizing presence during personnel changes and intense touring schedules. After Ross departed in the early 1970s, Wilson continued with new lineups, protecting the catalog and the performance standard. She later authored memoirs that documented the group's internal history and the business structures around Motown, contributing to public understanding of contract terms, royalties, and credit. Wilson also engaged in cultural diplomacy and arts advocacy, appearing at civic events and supporting museum programs that preserve the legacy of the Detroit sound. Public controversies often involve disputes over naming rights, archival materials, and narratives of authorship, and Wilson addressed these matters through court filings, interviews, and carefully prepared public statements. In later years, Wilson continued to tour and record selectively while managing health and travel demands. She remained active in broadcast appearances and documentary projects that revisited the origins of the group. Wilson died in the state of Nevada in the month of February in the year 2021, with local authorities confirming natural causes. The passing drew statements from former colleagues, Motown executives, and institutions that had worked with her on educational programming, highlighting a consistent role as an ambassador for the music. Wilson was interred at Holy Cross Cemetery in the city of Culver City in the state of California. The cemetery is a frequent site of industry memorials, and her resting place receives visits from admirers who associate the Supremes with the intersection of music, fashion, and broadcast spectacle. Floral tributes and recorded performances often accompany commemorations organized by fan groups and alumni of Motown's touring companies. It is historically relevant that Wilson's burial in Southern California reflects the bicoastal nature of her later career and media work, while many institutional commemorations remain anchored in Detroit. The split between the city of origin and the center of broadcast production mirrors the group's trajectory, joining local memory to national media archives. Edward James Kendricks was born in the city of Union Springs in the state of Alabama and raised largely in the city of Birmingham within a close-knit family and church environment. Early friendships included Paul Williams, with whom Kendricks formed the Cavaliers, then the Primes, establishing a partnership that blended complementary voices and shared ambition. A move to the city of Detroit placed the group in proximity to Motown's ecosystem of writers, choreographers, and bandleaders. Within the Temptations, Kendricks built relationships that balanced camaraderie with competition for lead lines, while maintaining ties to relatives and longtime friends in Alabama. Personal life remained private in public settings, with most attention centered on his role inside rehearsals and studio sessions. Kendrick's public contribution rests on a distinctive light tenor and falsetto that became a signature texture of the Temptations' sound. He led recordings that defined the group's romantic image while adapting to changing production styles in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Stage presence emphasized elegant movement, precision timing, and controlled dynamics that supported the group's choreography. After departing the Temptations, Kendricks pursued a solo path that delivered national success, demonstrating his capacity to carry full albums and headline tours. Career management involved routine challenges over royalties, taxes, and label support, common across artists of the era. Kendricks appeared in reunion settings that affirmed a lasting public bond with former bandmates, helping preserve the canon on television specials and major concerts. His voice remained a reference point for later soul and pop singers who drew on his phrasing and agile upper register. Health concerns emerged in the early 1990s, When Kendricks received a diagnosis of lung cancer that led to surgeries and a reduction in travel, he continued to make select appearances, balancing treatment with commitments to reunion performances that carried strong symbolic value for audiences. Kendricks died in the city of Birmingham in the month of October in the year 1992. News reports and family statements confirmed the cause, and memorials noted both his individual achievements and his long partnership with fellow founders of the group. Kendricks was buried at Elmwood Cemetery in the city of Birmingham, a historic resting place that anchors his legacy in the city where he came of age. The gravesite receives regular visits from admirers who associate his voice with pivotal moments in the Motown catalog, and it serves as a point of civic recognition for Birmingham's contribution to national music history. Local organizations and alumni of touring ensembles have marked anniversaries with modest ceremonies and floral tributes, linking hometown pride to the wider story of the Temptations. It is historically relevant that Kendricks returned in death to the city that first shaped his musical discipline, rather than to the Detroit grounds associated with Motown's daily work. The burial location underscores a life that joined national visibility to enduring regional identity, aligning public remembrance with the community that nurtured his early talents. James Ambrose Johnson Jr. was born in the city of Buffalo in the state of New York, the third of 8 children in a household marked by frequent moves and early exposure to club bands. Family relationships were complex, and early service-related entanglements led James to Canada, where friendships with musicians broadened his influences before industry ties brought him to the city of Los Angeles and to Motown. Mentorships and collaborations, including work with session players and rising protégés, shaped a circle that mixed creative support with intense personal loyalties. James's public contribution defined a strain of late 20th century funk that fused rock textures, disco-era rhythm, and candid lyrical themes. At Motown, he wrote, produced, and performed material that refreshed the label's catalog for radio and emerging video formats. And he developed Stone City Band as a vehicle for a touring sound with prominent horn lines and synthesizers. He helped introduce Tina Marie to a broader audience, underscoring his role as a producer and arranger who could tailor material to an artist's strengths. Cultural impact extended to choreography, fashion, and stagecraft that emphasized high-energy performance. James also faced notable controversies, including disputes over explicit content in video outlets and public arguments about industry double standards, which he framed in interviews as questions of access and equity. Decline followed years of legal problems, health strain, and documented substance use that contributed to arrests, court proceedings, and incarceration in the early 1990s. After release, James managed a partial return to touring and recording, supported by a loyal fan base and renewed interest in classic funk. He died in the city of Los Angeles in the month of August in the year 2004. Coroner findings cited a complex medical picture in which heart disease and other conditions were present alongside evidence of substances, and press coverage reviewed the clinical details without establishing a single simple cause. James was buried at Forest Lawn Cemetery in the city of Buffalo, returning his public story to the city where his earliest musical experiences began. The gravesite has become a consistent site of pilgrimage for fans of funk and for local residents who associate his career with Buffalo's identity. Anniversaries bring floral tributes, album art, and quiet gatherings that mark his dual role as a national figure and a hometown artist. It is historically relevant that a performer whose image was closely tied to Los Angeles studios and national television rests in western New York soil. The burial reinforces the thread of regional origin that runs through his catalog, connecting a global career to a local map of clubs, schools, and neighborhoods where the earliest bands took shape. Mary Christine Brockert was born in the city of Santa Monica in the state of California and raised in neighborhoods on the west side where family support and school music programs encouraged early performance. Close relationships with relatives, classmates, and local bandmates led to steady rehearsal habits, while club dates in Southern California introduced Marie to professional expectations. Connections through producers and mutual acquaintances brought her to Motown, where mentorship from Rick James and interactions with veteran session players shaped a disciplined approach to writing, arranging, and leading a studio band. Marie's public contribution joined classic soul phrasing to West Coast craft, with a strong emphasis on self-written material and instrumental control. She recorded albums that balanced ballads and up-tempo funk, extending Motown's reach into album-oriented radio in the late 1970s and early 1980s. As a multi-instrumentalist and producer, Marie asserted authorship in credits and in interviews, reinforcing a model of creative independence for women in the industry. A widely noted legal dispute with Motown, resolved through a ruling popularly known as the Brockert Initiative, limited the length of exclusive recording contracts without releasing new material, influencing how labels managed stalled artist relationships. Later work on independent imprints and collaborations across genres kept Marie visible, and her catalog fed sampling, live covers, and broadcast tributes that underlined her impact on R&B continuity. In later years, Marie experienced health challenges, including a reported fall and subsequent issues that led to periods of reduced travel. She maintained close ties with her daughter, extended family, and a circle of musicians who supported selective touring and recording. Marie died in the city of Pasadena in the month of December in the year 2010. Authorities reported natural causes with no evidence of a criminal act, and colleagues emphasized her work ethic and studio focus in statements that followed. Memorial services featured performances by peers and protégés, acknowledging a career that combined songwriting discipline with vocal power. Marie was buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in the Hollywood Hills area of the city of Los Angeles. The gravesite sits within a cemetery that holds many figures from film and music, and it receives quiet visits from fans who associate her artistry with a specific era of Los Angeles studios and radio. Floral tributes and handwritten notes appear around anniversaries, often referencing key album titles and song lyrics linked to personal milestones for listeners. It is historically relevant that Marie's final resting place lies near the studios where much of her catalog was recorded, reinforcing a narrative of close geographic ties between creation and commemoration. The site anchors remembrance in the city that supported her emergence as a writer, producer, and performer who shaped contract law and album-centered soul on the West Coast. Levi Stubbles was born in the city of Detroit and grew up in a close family that valued steady work, education, and church music. Childhood friendships with Abdul Fakir, Ronaldo Benson, and Lawrence Payton formed the basis of a vocal group that rehearsed in neighborhood settings before professional opportunities emerged. The four friends adopted the name The Four Tops and maintained an unusual stability of membership over decades, binding personal loyalty to a collective brand. Relationships with Motown's writers, producers, and the artist development staff shaped the group's coordinated movement and refined harmony blend, while Stubbs maintained a private home life centered on long marriage and family support. Stubbs' public contribution rests on a commanding baritone that brought urgency to the Four Tops catalog, welding lyrical romance to a rhythmic drive that anchored the group's identity. At Motown, recordings with the Holland Dozier Holland team delivered a sequence of chart leaders, setting a standard for ensemble performance in the mid-1960s. Stubbs declined solo billing even when his voice carried the records, reinforcing the group-first ethos that distinguished the Four Tops from peer ensembles. Later work included film and television voice acting, most notably the Plant character in a musical comedy that showcased his theatrical projection. The group navigated the transition from Motown's Detroit period to national and international touring, preserving choreography and dress codes that communicated continuity to audiences across changing musical eras. Health concerns surfaced over time, including a stroke that limited Stubbs' mobility and stage activity. The group continued to tour with adjusted arrangements, while Stubbs reduced appearances and focused on rehabilitation and family life. He died in the city of Detroit in the month of October in the year 2008. Obituaries emphasized the lifelong bond among the Four Tops, the discipline of their rehearsal culture, and the steadiness of Stubbs' offstage character. The passing prompted tributes from across the music industry and from civic leaders who associated the group with Detroit's cultural image. Stubbs was interred in the Detroit area, with memorial practices linked to Woodlawn Cemetery, where several Motown figures are buried, and with family arrangements that respected privacy. The resting place sits within a landscape of Motown alumni graves and memorials that draw visitors who trace the label's history through cemetery maps, headstones, and shared plots. Fan gatherings and anniversary acknowledgments note the integrity of the Four Tops membership and the centrality of Stubbs' voice to their sound. It is historically relevant that a singer who refused individual billing rests within a communal geography of Motown burials. The setting reflects the group values that defined his career, and it situates remembrance within Detroit's civic fabric, where ensemble discipline and neighborhood origins remain central to the story. Mary Esther Wells was born in the city of Detroit and raised by a mother who worked multiple jobs with extended family and neighborhood friends, providing informal support. As a teenager, Wells balanced work as a house cleaner with school and amateur performances, building relationships with local musicians and DJs who encouraged her to bring original material to Motown. Within the company, Wells worked closely with producers and songwriters who recognized her poised delivery and adaptable tone. Professional ties extended to tourmates on Motown reviews, where shared buses, theaters, and rehearsals forged durable friendships and a collaborative stage culture. Wells's public contribution established Motown's first sustained run of national hits, led by a solo woman, positioning the label as a force on pop radio and television. Recordings such as You Beat Me to the Punch and Two Lovers showed conversational phrasing over crisp rhythm sections, while My Guy crystallized a blend of wit, melody, and restraint that crossed formats. Touring schedules placed Wells before integrated audiences across the country, and television appearances presented a composed figure who advanced the label's approach to artist development. Contract issues later led to a departure from Motown, and subsequent releases on other labels met with mixed support, highlighting the importance of coordinated production, promotion, and distribution. Despite industry turbulence, Wells remained a touchstone for later artists who cited her repertoire as a model for pop soulcraft. Decline followed health struggles that emerged in the late 1980s when Wells received a diagnosis of cancer in the throat area. Medical treatment affected speaking and singing, limiting travel and reducing performance opportunities. Colleagues organized benefit events to support medical costs, and interviews documented her determination to remain engaged with audiences and peers. Wells died in the city of Los Angeles in the month of July in the year 1992. Press coverage and memorial remarks emphasized her pioneering role at Motown and the way her early successes helped stabilize the company's business at a critical moment. Wells was interred at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in the city of Glendale in the state of California. The gravesite rests within a park that holds many figures from the recording and film industries, and it receives steady visits from admirers who associate her recordings with the emergence of Detroit soul on national airwaves. Tributes often reference My Guy as a cultural marker that aligned Motown's songwriting assembly line with a distinct voice and presence. It is historically relevant that a singer who opened national doors for Motown rests in a Southern California cemetery that became a hub for entertainment memorials. The location underscores the connection between Detroit's studio system and the broadcast and film networks that amplified her music to a wide audience. David Melvin English was born in the city of Montgomery in the state of Alabama and moved as a child to the city of Detroit, where extended family and neighborhood churches provided structure and musical exposure. Friendships with Otis Williams and other young singers led to early groups that rehearsed in homes and community centers before coalescing into the Temptations under Motown's umbrella. Within the group, Franklin cultivated steady bonds that balanced the demands of travel, recording, and choreography with a private life that emphasized family and reliability. His colleagues often cited his calming presence and humor during long tours and intensive studio schedules. Franklin's public contribution centered on a resonant bass that grounded the Temptations' harmonies and added weight to stage arrangements. Although he took fewer lead lines than other members, his timbre shaped the ensemble's identity and provided contrast that allowed tenors and baritones to cut through with dramatic effect. On stage, Franklin's height and composed movement supported the group's visual balance, and his interjections during live medleys became audience favorites. He participated in film and television projects that documented Motown's history, speaking about rehearsal methods, wardrobe planning, and the discipline that defined the group's longevity. The consistency of his role helped stabilize lineup shifts across decades, reinforcing the brand even as musical styles evolved. Health difficulties developed over time, including arthritis and complications that affected mobility and endurance. Franklin experienced hospitalizations and periods of reduced activity, yet he returned to work when possible, motivated by commitments to the group and to audiences. In the mid-1990s, Franklin suffered a series of medical setbacks, including seizures, and he died in the city of Los Angeles in the month of February in the year 1995. Obituaries and memorials emphasized his foundational role, noting that without his anchoring tone, the Temptations' sound would have been markedly different. Franklin was buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in the Hollywood Hills area of the city of Los Angeles. The cemetery is a frequent resting place for figures from the entertainment industry, and his grave receives visits from admirers who associate the Temptations' choreography and layered vocals with the peak years of American soul. Floral tributes often include references to signature live callouts and deep bass lines that audiences remember from concert recordings and television appearances. It is historically relevant that a singer whose voice grounded a Detroit-born ensemble rests in Southern California, where the group also spent significant time for television and film work. The location reflects the dual geography of Motown's legacy, divided between the city where the records were crafted and the centers of broadcast that carried the music to a national audience. James Lee Jamerson was born on Edisto Island in the state of South Carolina, then raised in the city of Detroit after his family moved north during his youth. Relationships with schoolmates and local bandleaders drew Jamerson into neighborhood clubs where rhythm and blues, jazz standards, and gospel blended on small stages. He married young, maintained a family household in Detroit, and built enduring ties with fellow musicians who later formed the core of Motown's in-house band. Daily proximity to writers, producers, and other session players created a collaborative culture in which trust, punctuality, and musical shorthand were essential to rapid production schedules. Jamerson's public contribution, largely uncredited at the time, redefined the role of the electric bass in popular music. As a principal member of the Funk Brothers, Jamerson recorded on an extraordinary share of Motown's singles and albums during the 1960s and early 1970s. His lines favored syncopated movement, chromatic approach tones, and melodic counterpoint that supported, and sometimes conversed with, lead vocals. The use of a precision bass with high-action, flat-wound strings and a single foam mute produced a dry, percussive attack that remained warm and vocal. Her recordings such as My Girl, You Can't Hurry, Love, For Once in My Life, and What's Going On illustrate how his parts carried harmonic motion and rhythmic feel. Beyond Motown, Jamerson influenced generations of bassists who studied his phrasing, note placement, and ability to leave space without losing momentum. His cultural impact grew after credit lists and documentaries brought overdue recognition, and institutions honored him with inductions and lifetime awards that reframed session work as central authorship. In the early 1970s, industry changes, a label moved to the city of Los Angeles, and personal challenges disrupted Jamerson's routines. Health problems, including alcoholism and related complications, affected reliability and led to periods of reduced work. He relocated to Southern California, seeking studio calls in a more diffuse session economy that no longer centered on a single label system. Jamerson died in the city of Los Angeles in the month of August in the year 1983, with medical reports citing pneumonia and heart failure amid a wider context of illness. News of his death traveled unevenly at first, then gathered force as musicians and historians emphasized his foundational role in the canon. Jamerson was buried at Woodlawn Cemetery in the city of Detroit, returning his story to the community where his style took shape. The gravesite has become a pilgrimage point for bassists and fans who study his recorded parts and regard his work as a blueprint for modern rhythm sections. Memorial gatherings and instrument tributes appear at intervals, often coordinated with music education programs and museum exhibits that feature his techniques and personal equipment. It is historically relevant that the architect of so much Detroit recorded music rests in Detroit ground. The burial site links study and remembrance to the city's broader history of migration, factory work, and club culture, underscoring how a local ecosystem produced innovations that later defined international popular music. Robert Edward Rogers was born in the city of Detroit and grew up within a network of relatives, neighbors, and church communities that supported youth music. Rogers formed early bonds with Smokey Robinson, Ronnie White, Pete Moore, and Claudette Rogers, who later became his wife, and those relationships matured into the Miracles. The group's cohesion rested on extended friendship, shared rehearsal habits, and guidance from Motown's artist development staff. Rogers balanced touring and studio duties with family responsibilities, and his marriage connected personal life directly to the ensemble's history. Rogers' public contributions centered on harmony singing, stage balance, and songwriting support that strengthened the Miracles across changing eras. His tenor parts anchored group blend on signature recordings, while his choreography and presence supported a polished live presentation. Rogers co-wrote material that broadened the catalog, and he remained a steady figure through the transition when Robinson left the group, helping sustain bookings and protect the brand. Beyond the Miracles, Rogers participated in label events, anniversary tours, and museum initiatives that preserved institutional memory. His reputation rested on reliability, musicality, and diplomacy within a company that prized punctual delivery and exacting standards. In later years, Rogers faced health challenges that reduced travel and limited public appearances. He continued to attend ceremonies and interviews when possible, sharing recollections of Motown's early routines, the touring circuits, and the importance of discipline in vocal groups. Rogers died in the city of Southfield, part of the Detroit metropolitan area, in the month of March in the year 2013. Obituaries highlighted his role as a founding member and his long presence alongside the label's growth from a neighborhood house studio to international recognition. Rogers was buried at Woodlawn Cemetery in the city of Detroit, where many Motown figures have their final resting places. The gravesite sits within a landscape that allows visitors to trace the label's history through adjacent plots, markers, and memorials. Fans and fellow musicians visit to leave flowers and to reflect on the ensemble craft that defined the Miracles and the broader Detroit sound. It is historically relevant that a group-focused artist rests among peers who collectively built Motown's reputation. The burial setting underscores the value of harmony. Singers and collaborators whose steady work, often outside the spotlight, made possible the catalog that later defined an era. James Lee Ruffin was born in the city of Collinsville in the state of Mississippi and grew up in a family that valued church singing and steady work. Older brother David pursued music first, and family ties helped Jimmy navigate early auditions and regional performances. Moves between the South and the city of Detroit connected Ruffin to a circle of musicians, producers, and DJs who shaped his approach to phrasing and repertoire selection. Within Motown's ecosystem, Ruffin balanced independence with guidance from staff writers, building relationships that supported careful single choices and studio discipline. Ruffin's public contribution centered on a warm, direct tenor that carried narratives of resilience and loss with plain-spoken clarity. With What Becomes of the Broken-Hearted, Ruffin delivered a defining record of the 1960s that paired orchestral lift with conversational delivery, giving soul audiences a durable anthem of perseverance. Subsequent releases sustained his presence on radio, and Ruffin later found strong reception in the United Kingdom, where television appearances and touring kept his name before new listeners. He recorded duets and collaborated with producers outside the Motown core, showing flexibility across arrangements while retaining an unforced vocal style. Cultural impact persisted through recurrent uses of his signature song in film and broadcast, and through cover versions that affirmed the work's cross-generational appeal. In later years, Ruffin divided time between the United States and Europe, maintaining a selective performance schedule and engaging in interviews that documented his perspective on the Motown period. Health concerns emerged gradually, and travel decreased as he focused on family and close friends. Ruffin died in the city of Las Vegas in the month of November in the year 2014, with reports citing an illness treated in a local hospital. Tributes emphasized his individual identity apart from group dynamics and noted the songcraft that allowed his best-known recordings to endure across decades. Ruffin's burial arrangements were kept private at the request of family, and no widely publicized gravesite has become a routine destination for visitors. Memorial observances have centered in Detroit and in British venues that supported his later career, with radio specials and concert dedications marking anniversaries. Fans often commemorate his legacy through recorded media and community events rather than at a single marker. It is historically relevant that a singer known for one of soul music's most recognizable laments is remembered without a prominent public gravesite. The focus remains on the record itself, on the broadcast documents, and on the performance history that made a plain, compassionate voice a lasting emblem of popular soul.